Mr. President, to pursue the request of Secretary. Okay. Well, Secretary is not here, but I want him to hear this. But maybe we can take
Yeah.
1 minute
Yes,
break.
suspend session for a minute. We'll wait for the secretary. Sure.
Mr. President, along the lines of the request of Senator Risa, I've conferred with the good secretary, and he committed to submit the 4 service contracts containing the details of the counterparties, the details of the other details such as location, potential, and other things. And they committed to submit this to us tomorrow, Mr. President.
Thank you, good sponsor. Could that be tomorrow morning so that we can study them during the day while we are continuing with the budget interpellations?
Yeah. Mr. President, the appeal is by lunchtime, Mr. President, because they need to collect the information.
Yes, that will be fine,
Yeah.
good
Okay.
sponsor. At maraming salamat po. Though I have to just also say that I can't for the life of me understand, logically at least, kung ibibigay din naman ni NASEC sa atin yung mga kopya ng service contracts with all the details therein, kung bakit hindi nila kahit masabi ngayong gabi on record kung sino yung mga awardees. Well, in any case, I do thank the good chairman and the majority leader for facilitating that we will receive copies of those service contracts by tomorrow noon. Salamat po, good sponsor. One last question from this representation, good sponsor, on behalf of Sen Leila. She actually has 3 questions, but the first 2 questions were already covered by the questions I asked earlier. So if the good sponsor could just allow me to ask one of her questions. It was recently reported that Zamboanga City has a higher petroleum price than neighboring cities and provinces. Mayor Maria Isabel Climaco asked for help from the department, but was merely told by Oil Industry Management Bureau Director Rino Abad to pressure fuel retailers in the city into lowering their prices. However, Director Abad also admitted that the freight and operating costs in Zamboanga factored in its higher fuel prices. Now, without a direct import terminal with depot, Zamboanga City would be hard pressed to force the local businesses to match the price in neighboring cities. So, would sponsor in situations like these is suspension of the excise tax on fuel for distressed areas like Zamboanga City totally out of the question? Is the department willing to consider recommending such a measure on limited application? And what else can the DOE suggest to help cities like Zamboanga City, which are heavily affected by the ongoing fuel inflation?
And other things like bundling. Yeah, the unbundling. Yeah, but that's part of your suggestion. Yeah, legislative. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. President, the Zamboanga situation, no, in fact, we did our own studies. It's about 5 peso more. And based on our internal studies, the reason for that is really logistics. I think it's, again, no, I'm basing this on our own internal research subject to validation. But what we found out that the logistical cost to ship oil and refined products to Zamboanga is much more costly. No? As to why, we still need to conduct further studies on that. But the Secretary and the DOE, their position is competition in the area is robust. There are a lot of new players there, a lot of oil companies that are there. They are monitoring the situation, and in fact, they've already requested some of the players to give discounts to lower down the cost of fuel. Insofar as the oil deregulation law is concerned, they actually sent us a letter suggesting several amendments to the oil deregulation law. One of which is unbundling. No, this is the unbundling um, request that DOE gave us. This is to promote transparency in the pricing of fuel, to exactly know how much is the industry take, or in short, profit of the oil players, and to make sure that in times like this, where prices prices go up almost instantaneously, we will make the DOE will have the power to make sure that the players are not abusing by jacking up their price instantaneously as well. No? So in short, no, they've submitted to us several recommendations to amend the oil deregulation law. One of the recommendation is to improve transparency through unbundling.
Thank you, good sponsor. And in addition to the short-term solution of requesting some players to give discounts, and then the longer-term solution of amending the oil deregulation law, um, is the department saying that totally out of the question yung suspension ng excise tax sa fuel doon?
It was already heard. It was already heard in Congress. The bill was already approved for suspension for 6 months in the committee level and will appear there. So they have the silang first instance kasi.
But that's your recommendation, yun, di ba?
Yeah, part of the recommendation.
Yeah. It's also part of the recommendation. In fact, I've heard several of the DOE's pronouncement on news, and they suggested to suspend excise tax. In fact, that was their position during the hearing at the lower house.
Salamat para doon, good sponsor, at sa department. And lastly, what else can the department suggest to help cities like Zamboanga City, which are heavily affected by the ongoing fuel inflation? I mean, meron pa bang iba bukod dun sa discounts at saka yung mas matagal na amendments sa oil deregulation law?
The hands of the private sector. That's why we started on government back into supply chain. But again, that requires investment.
What?
Strategy. That's why Petroleum.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the secretary mentioned that the tools to arrest abrupt price increases are very limited, considering that the oil industry is now in the hands of the private sector. So one of the things that he recommends is for government to participate in the supply chain as well as into the procurement of petroleum products. No, of course, this is subject to a lot of debates and research and talk and discussion. I personally have reservations on that because obviously government buying oil will require a lot of capital. No? But that's part of the solution that they are thinking on a long-term basis.
Thank you, good sponsor, and this representation. Thanks to good sponsor and the department on behalf of Sen Leila, and we will be forwarding the response to her. Oh, before I end, good sponsor, Mr. President, I see Sen Dick raising his hand.
Yes, we recognize the good gentleman from Zambales, Senator Gordon.
I thank you, Mr. President, Majority Floor Leader. Just want to follow up on the question of Senator Riza, which I thought were excellent questions. We're looking at suspending fuel taxes, but isn't it the job of the Department of Energy to find out what are the logistics requirements, let's say in Mindanao? I understand in Zamboanga, the fuel is 61 pesos. Is that correct? And in North Cotabato, it's already at 70 pesos.
Yeah.
So the price of oil is running amok, it would seem, in Mindanao. And the good senator from Panay was saying that are there any possibilities? And I'm not happy with the answer of the good chairman through the Department of Energy. Don't we have a fuel farm anywhere else there? You have a major base in Zamboanga. That's the base of what is this? The Westcom. You have an Air Force, a Navy, and a military base there, and it's right next to Sulu. And certainly they would be in need of fuel. You cannot afford that the military will run out of fuel. Is there any answer to this question? Is there a master plan to make sure that we can ease the flow by making sure that we have storage tanks of fuel? Like in Subic, when I took over there, we had 29 days supply of Philippine oil, if I'm not mistaken. And we have since expanded it when we gave it to Coastal Petroleum, an American firm, and later on it was transferred to a Filipino firm right now. And the government, I think, also has oil farms in Batangas, if I'm not mistaken. So it's important. Do we have any oil farms in petroleum oil farms in Zamboanga?
To answer your question, Mr. President, it's all in the private hands. There are oil depots there, tank farms. However, it's operated by private individuals or private companies. After the Oil Deregulation Law, private companies were allowed to put in the infrastructure necessary to distribute oil refined products. And in fact, the good secretary has been talking about what the department calls the strategic petroleum reserve. No, this is a concept that the department is studying right now, and the concept here is to have our own buffer. No, in case of global oil aberration, we will have our own inventory here, and the inventory will protect us from shocks, both supply shocks and also pricing shocks, Mr. President. So, in short, to answer your question, the depots and the tank farms are all run and operated by private companies.
Now, on a matter of legislative policy or national interest or security policy, I know that we have deregulated, but in the matter of sustaining this country, should there be an oil embargo like the ones in the 70s, wouldn't it not be in the interest of the country to have the government own its own stocks or supply of fuel that they don't touch unless they have to? I know the United States and other countries have stored fuel in case of a war.
Yeah.
And they will not touch that. They rarely touch that, even if there's a crisis in oil. I think they have only touched that about a few years ago, but they did not really take all of it. And of course, since they discovered shale, they have become more energy independent. But in our case, where we have a string of islands, may I ask for the Department of Energy to supply this representation and the Senate, for that matter, as a whole, where how we protect ourselves, to show a map of where strategic areas are properly supplied by oil, so that we can control the price as well, and that whether a policy of public-private partnership, especially on oil depots, can be undertaken for strategic purposes. Is there such a policy? And if not, should the Congress start looking into that policy?
Yes, Mr. President, to answer your question directly, yes. The Department of Energy issued a department circular to jumpstart the study of a possibility of a setting up of a strategic petroleum reserve. This was coined after the bombing of the Saudi Aramco refinery a few years back, where we had some threats of supply issues. So the department's already issued a department circular to study the possibility of setting up a strategic petroleum reserve. PNOC will be the entity that will spearhead this, and they will conduct this and recommend to Congress on the possibility of setting up this type of reserve.
To ask for a timeline, when did you start planning, and when have you started implementing that? I'd imagine that's a good step in the right direction, but it cannot just be in the stage of planning forever.
I know there is fun, diba? I remember. I remember.
And I'm sure the Department of Energy should know, in the storage depots of all these private agencies, we should know how much fuel they have every day. So we can estimate how much fuel we have in this country.
Next year.
Would not that be correct, Mr. President?
But Mr. President, I was informed by the department the study is already ongoing, and they will have some preliminary recommendations by middle of next year. Of course,
Yeah,
this will
my
be
question
subject
is, when
to
did the
further
planning start,
discussions.
and when are you supposed to have this done in fruition? Again, my main comment on government is always that when they're asked a question, it's always present progressive. It's being planned. Uh, it's being implemented, but there is no, just a while ago sa labor, we were asking, ano plano nyo, just in case there is a strategic situation where we have to move people out, and I didn't hear any plan. Or when are you going to remove the 60,000 people that are stranded in Saudi Arabia or in other places? The plan is there, and we have the plan when they come here, but we're talking about the people stranded there. What we're talking about here is that people are being made to suffer because of lack of vision. The Department of Energy should have the vision to see that we have strategic oil reserves, so that our people will not be under the jackboot of private entities
Okay.
on rapacious profit-oriented.
Middle to. Mr. President, just to reiterate, the output of the study will come between middle of next year to November of 2022, based on the timeline that was submitted to us by the PNOC. So, in short, they have already jump-started the study of the strategic petroleum reserve, and the intention is precisely what the gentleman from Zambales mentioned, to set up some form of reserves to isolate us from shocks, external shocks.
In fact, Mr. President, when I was in Subic, we restored the pipeline between Subic and Clark, and the plan was to extend the pipeline from Subic, from Clark, all the way to Manila. Maybe in Bulacan, not going to Pandacan anymore, but Manila will always be spared from that if we had storage facilities there. And Batangas should be doing the same. And in a place like Mindanao, or for that matter, the Visayas, where they can be isolated. Like I understand in Sulu, meron bang storage depot doon, or are we at the mercy of private gas stations there? Or in Zamboanga, I understand there's a storage plant there, storage depot there. What is the capacity? or for that matter in Cotabato? What is the capacity? We have oceans that can come in, and we can have tankers supplying this. And would the plan include the pipeline servicing so that we're never going to run out of fuel? Would that be a step in the right direction, sir?
That's part.
We'd like to
That's part of
recognize
the
Senator
study, Mr.
Pangilinan as
President.
well, raising his hand.
Yeah, that's part of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve Study. No? Looking at the infrastructure, looking at the feasibility, looking at the capital requirement. So all of those will form part of the feasibility study.
When was the study supposed to have started? Kung yung binaming yung Aramco sa Saudi Arabia was the fuse that woke us up. It was a wake-up call. When was this supposed to have been undertaken? Kailan nagsimula yung planning? At sino ang nagpaplano?
Well, as we speak, Mr. President, they will be awarding the entity that will conduct the study, Mr. President. It will be spearheaded by the PNOC mother company, Mr. President.
This week?
No, as we speak, Mr. President. In their process already, they've already chosen.
It's as we speak in general terms. I'm asking for specificity.
Kailan ba?
Hindi na pwedeng ganyan ang sabi nyo, general terms. People are already having a hard time in Zamboanga. Prices will go up there. And we're not in good shape in terms of our national debt. Our GDP is already affected by our trillion peso loans. In fact, we're worried about regrading of the a new grading structure that will be introduced, which means na bababa na naman ang pera natin.
Yeah. Well, they will be awarding the study to this outsourced entity before the year ends, Mr. President.
General na naman. Who is this outsourced entity? Hindi pa napipili.
Miss,
Is it in the budget? I don't see anything in the budget on that outsourced facility.
Third party.
Something as important as that should be in the budget.
Wala pang award? But within the end of the year, they will be conducting. Okay. Yeah. What I understand, Mr. President, is it encountered two failed biddings because of its complexity. So so PNOC will be choosing the third party entity will be conducting the feasibility study before the end of the year, Mr. President.
The country is being held hostage. Our economy is being held hostage by a complexity of bidding. I mean,
No, Mr. President, it's a complexity of the project, Mr. President. That's why it encountered two failed biddings.
If that is the answer by the Americans, they would never have put a man on the moon, or they would not have all these strategic weapons that they have, or these new inventions that come out of space travel or space technology that have now produced everything from satellite phones to things like that. I don't know why it's taking us so long. I mean,
Well, Mr. President, the department told me that before the end of the year, they'll be awarding it to a third party who will conduct the feasibility study. And by middle to end of next year,
the year will end. We're already approaching December.
yes,
And
Mr.
you've not
President.
even bidded it out. You've had two failed biddings, you say. How can you award it at the end of the bidding? Come on. You're not talking to grade school children here.
Yeah, Mr. President, after two failed biddings, the department can already enter into a negotiated.
I'm aware of that, and that's what's my next question. Hindi kaya you laid the predicate for a failed bidding so that you could have a negotiated bid, and you now know kung sino yung bibigyan nyo ng bidding. You see, that attracts the radar of the senators. Ano ba yan? Sino bibigyan nyo? Parang sigurado kayo na may bibigyan na kayo from the way you sound.
Well, with the indulgence of the good gentleman from Zambales, we can request PNOC to submit to us the terms of reference, the timetable. I have a timetable, but we can revise the timetable, the new revised timetable, and all of the activities that is part of the feasibility study process.
And you know, I'm really sometimes I get very exasperated because when people cannot answer, we just ask them to produce documentation and then it is forgotten into the dustbin of history. And to my mind, I think that when you come here, you should be totally prepared. These are good questions that have been asked by the gentle lady from Panay, and it has led to a flurry of questions on our insecurity, our instability in our fuel, the situation that can affect transportation, that can affect production, and that can affect the buying power of the Filipino people. Don't you think that this should have been prioritized from day one?
Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But for Strategic Petroleum. Yeah. Well, Mr. President, I was advised that 150 million was allocated for this feasibility study since 2020, Mr. President. So we will definitely pursue this matter, Mr. President, and compel the department, the PNOC entity, to submit to us the required
In which
documents.
case, the president of the PDP Laban should be prepared to answer that as an election issue. That you were absent in terms of preparing the country for a shock in case we get into trouble. There is no strategic reserves by this country, and the price of fuel will skyrocket, and you better be prepared to answer that.
I would just like to remind our colleagues that we have others listed to interpolate, and I hope the gentleman from Zambales could.
So are you telling me now, Your Honor, the majority of the chair is telling me now that these questions are inappropriate, that I should stop? These
No,
are
absolutely
questions that
not.
are
But the
vital.
floor. No, absolutely not, Mr. President. It's just that
Have
if
a-
you can see, Senator Pangilinan was next in line of questioning. He's raising his
I
hand.
am willing to give way to Mr. Pangilinan. I'm just trying to get an answer. It would be
Yes.
easy. Don't you agree, Senator Subiri, that if they only answered forthrightly and they were ready with their homework, this questioning would have been terminated a long time ago. But obviously, I am on a pathway to nowhere. So maybe I will ask my brother to continue. Maybe he might have a better mousetrap or a better pathfinder. I don't know. It's very hard for us senators to be able to look. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Although wala nang hay ngayon sa Pilipinas eh. Wala na halos dayami ako nakikita. But anyway, go ahead. I'm willing to step aside. And thank you, Senators Ontiveros. That was very prescient on your part. And that ticked me off because our people are held hostage by this situation. And our military is held hostage by this situation. And people who are trying to get back into the economy after this pandemic, which is not yet over, are held hostage to this situation. So I would like to give way to honor the concerns of my majority floor leader, who is my inaanak. And you see, I'm sensitive. Go ahead, Senator Pangilinan, with the permission of the Senate Majority Floor Leader, who's also acting chairman.
Yes,
thank
yes.
you.
No, we
Thank
just like to. No, actually, the good gentleman from Zambales could have his time. I'm not just saying that. It's just that I just want to ask if the good lady of Senator from Panay has already finished her line of questioning, so that
Just
we have two other gentlemen that are listed as well to ask questions. And if the good, my good Ninong would like to ask, he can also ask. No one will be prohibited from asking.
I just thought
Thank you,
that
Mr.
the
President.
gentle lady from Panay had a very prescient question that ticked me off in terms of concern. I'm not here to grandstand because, o nga, ano, bakit daw tayong planong ganyan? And then ang sagot pinaplano na ako. Oh, bibid na ako at the end of the month. How can you make me believe na even ano kayo, kayo ba, andyan ba sa inyo si Juan? Si Lau? Andyan ba sa inyo? Yung mabilis mag-bidding? PSDBM, ganun ba yan? Ang bilis? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
President. Thank you, Mr. President. I just have one.
The majority floor leader. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
thank you very
President. I
much,
just
sir.
have
Yes,
one,
go ahead, Madam.
just one
Reese,
last
ma'am.
manifestation after Sen Kiko interjects, Mr. President.
No, I was actually going to say that it was a follow-up question or a follow-up question on the point earlier raised, and therefore we allowed it and we accommodated it. But that was just that, and the point was in fact present, and we agree. Go ahead. We will just wait for the.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, maybe we can finish the interpellation of the lady senator.
Yes,
and
thank
after
you.
which we can give the floor to Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just my last brief manifestation to clarify with the presiding officer and the good sponsor. Is my recollection correct of our understanding that the sponsor will deem the budget of the DOE submitted upon their sending of the service contracts and their details to the Senate tomorrow at noon? Do I remember that correctly, Mr. President? Good
Yes,
sponsor.
Mr. President, upon the commitment of the good secretary, the documents requested by the good gentle lady from Panay will be submitted before lunch, and the approval of the budget of the department is subject to to all the documents that were requested tonight. Most specifically, the 4 service contracts that you requested.
Thank you very much, good sponsor. Salamat ng marami sa pasensya nyo sa akin with these questions at this time of the day. So I'm done with my interpellation, Mr. President, good sponsor. Marami pong salamat sa
Thank you
inyo.
for the very important questions and very important reminders to the department.
Next in line to ask questions is the distinguished gentleman from Pampanga and Quezon City, Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Just a few questions, clarificatory questions on the earlier points raised by Senator Hontiveros. Distinguished sponsor, earlier there was a computation that was made, and that some amounts were placed on record. Just to clarify, about $1 billion worth of projected income up to 2024. Is that not right?
The exact number, Your Honor, is for the 45% interest of UC38, which is in effect UDENA, is about 751 million pesos.
Okay.
Dollars from 2020 to 2024. And then the 45% interest of Shell is $432 million from 2022 to 2024.
Yes, and I think the secretary earlier said that they're willing to give an extension to UDENA, perhaps until 2027, which means if the extension is given, then that's another ballpark figure of another $1 billion. Tama po ba yun? As a projected revenue.
What's the process?
Depending on the number of years, to the government share.
Yeah.
It will be government share. This is the contractor share. This is the 60% of the government.
Yeah.
So we don't lose this. 60% is known already. Then here is 45, 40% of the 40%.
But in extension, you're studying.
Ganyan na. Ang extension, baka pa yan kasi
Yeah.
specs ang nagnan-
Yeah. Mr. President, based on the information that I got, there's an ongoing negotiation insofar as the extension is concerned, and the extension is hinged on some deliverables and the ongoing negotiation right now. The deliverable, the 8, diba? 8 conditions. I remember during the hearing when we conducted that the DOE identified 8 deliverables that the consortium needs to undertake or commit, and this forms part of the negotiation, Mr. President. So, in other words, in short, there's an ongoing negotiation, and part of the negotiation process is the 8 deliverables that the consortium needs to commit to.
And how does that affect the projected revenue? I take it to mean that projected revenue will depend upon whether these 8 conditions are met. Tama po ba yun?
Di ba? Wala ito.
Yes. Well, my point being, Mr. Distinguished sponsor, is that the earlier amount of $1 billion+ is not the complete picture of what they're going to be earning given the extension. In other words, it could be precisely what we're giving up until including the extension is more than just $1 billion+.
Correct, Mr. President. We also have to take note that the projected decline of the gas is around 2024 also. So the logic behind pegging the contract on 2024 is because that is the projected decline of the gas. So, but that's
Is it-
also
yes.
only a projection. No, it can be it can come in late, it can come in early, but
Yes.
that's according to the experts. That's the projected timeline.
Yes. Earlier, Mr. Sponsor, the secretary relayed to you that to be able to explore more reserves to extend the life of the Malampaya field would require some time, no? If I remember right, it'll take time to do the exploration if you are to able to determine precisely the life of Malampaya field, the Malampaya field. That's why 2024 is a figure, but the exploration will determine whether it will be extended or not. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, Mr. President. Normally, exploration takes time, no?
Yes.
And the investment that comes with it also is quite significant. And in this type of business, it's also quite risky because not if you drill a well, there's no guarantee that you would also recover gas or oil.
Which brings us to the question, should not that have been enough basis to grant the extension of the license of Shell and Chevron rather than give it up and give it to someone else?
But the consortium asking that's the meaning. But when you give extension to it's expiration that begins but before that it would and then after that, they have to give a
Yeah, but the question is, because it takes a long time to recover and also to drill, bakit hindi natin in-extend na? Because this is a long term.
variety of extending to
And if I may add, the Chevron and Shell are both experienced, with long track record of in this field, and Udena does not. So it's a you're saying it takes time to explore. You did not extend. You refused to give the extension of the license to Chevron and Shell, and instead gave it to an
Bakit hindi natin extend na? Ba't hindi?
but you cannot just extend
and now the understanding is they are now accommodating or entertaining the extension for Udena. It's a policy that it's a bit bewildering.
Well, to be honest about it, Senator, Your Honor, I'm trying to make sense of the feedback from the secretary. I'm putting my, I'm trying to put together a cohesive answer for you, for His Honor. But
But I will
frankly
be
speaking,
satisfied, Mr. Sponsor. I'll be satisfied if it's on record that it's very difficult to explain. Meaning, I will take it as that because truly it is very difficult to explain.
well, on a well, we conducted in one of our hearings. We actually asked the same thing, because personally, every budget hearing, we would always ask the department about their plans on extension. And being the chairman of the Energy Committee, I talked to Shell, I talked to Chevron, I talked to these players, and I know for a fact that they are very interested in
Yes,
exploring what they call near wells of Malampaya.
yes,
But of course, being a high risk business, they also want to be assured of the extension, or else we will plow in billions of dollars, and then your contracts will end by 2024. So that created uncertainty in their business. In other words, no.
yes, yes.
My personal take, and this is probably not the same with, and definitely not the same with the department, that we should have looked at this from a long-term standpoint, because from a practical point of view, these entities, these companies will not plow in money without any certainty in their contract. And the
That is right.
timeline of 2024 created a lot of uncertainty. This is a this business is for the big boys, Senator
Yes.
Pico. It's not for the faint of heart. No, you need to
Yes.
have a lot of capital to engage in this type of business.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Also earlier, on the points raised by Senator Hontiveros, the PNOC on record said that procurement laws hamper no, their operations. Tama po ba yun? That was clarified earlier. No? So for one of the reasons why they did not exercise the right of first refusal.
Correct, Mr. President. That's the PNOC sat here for the record, but
Yes, yes.
that came out during our hearing,
Yes.
because we also asked the same question: what was the thought process behind foregoing the right of first refusal?
Yes.
The context of that, Mr. President, is every budget hearing of the PNOC EC, we would get their corporate vision of becoming a true oil and gas company. So I was also quite perplexed on why they forwent the investment in the why they forwent when the opportunity of buying the Chevron portion came in. That's why I asked them what was the thought process, and the direct answer of General Brigues, I remember very clearly, was and this will bear out in the records anyways, is that the procurement laws were quite complex for any business to operate in.
Would you consider that a bit strange? Because what's the point of continuing to explore if procurement laws will prevent you from becoming a full-fledged exploration company? You might as well
Close down.
close down.
Well, that was also my question, Mr. President, because I hear the budget of the DOE and all of its attached agencies, and PNOC being one of the attached agencies. I look at the vision and the direction of the company, and that's why I'm quite familiar with their
Yes.
direction. No? And that's why I'm also quite surprised when I heard that.
In terms of vision, they would be operating oil fields. Is that not right? And therefore, will be dealing with procurement laws. So if they are being
Yeah, correct, Mr. President. I share your sentiments, and again, that's also one of my question marks in the in my head
And,
on
and,
why.
and therefore, the distinguished sponsor, really, the
16-day to
the explanation
study to
that
10 months.
PNOC has given that they decided not to exercise their right of first refusal because they are hampered by procurement laws is, I think, is baseless. Does not have sound basis. In other words, they refused it without without basis or little basis.
Yeah.
Mr. Distinguished sponsor. I just
Well,
wanted that placed on record, and I understand that the good sponsor likewise shares the sentiment. Is it correct, Mr. Sponsor, that Udena UC Malampaya was incorporated in September 2019?
yes, Mr. President, that's correct, Mr. President.
And
In
was
Singapore,
able,
Mr. President.
yes, and was able to, and then 7 months later, was able to outmaneuver, for lack of a better term, PNOC, a 51-year-old company, in order to gain, 45 percent shares of which company is this? One or the other, either Chevron or Shell. So I just wanted that placed on record. You have a company incorporated in September of 2019. 7 months later, it's able to secure 45% of 45% shareholder of Malampaya, while precisely the PNOC, which has been exploring for 51 years, did not exercise its right of first refusal because of procurement limitations. I don't know how you're going to explain that, Mr. Sponsor, and I will understand if you are unable to do so precisely because of your earlier manifestations. I just wanted that placed on record, Mr. Distinguished Sponsor.
But to add to that, with the indulgence of the good gentleman from Quezon City, is the ability of PNOCEC to match the sale, no? Because to put it in simple terms, so PNOCEC has two important um, powers within their joint operating contract. No? Number one is the right to match, meaning whoever buys it, they have the right to match it. And then number two is the consent, no? Meaning whoever buys it and they don't match it, they still have to give the consent, because the consent is allowing you to conduct due diligence on your new partner.
Yes.
No? And logically, no, if a new entity will come in, you would want to know who this new entity is. If this new entity is qualified, if this new entity is financially strong, so that allows. And if, for example, after the conduct of due diligence, they found out that the entity is not qualified, they can exercise the refusal to give consent. So those are the two most important powers within the joint operating contract within the consortium, Mr. President. And just to add to that, of course, we all know that PNOCEC did not exercise those two important features of the contract.
Yes, and we believe to the detriment of our energy security and even national security in that regard. And I know this is another question. Is it correct, distinguished sponsor, that when the Secretary of Energy was in the private sector, that he did have business transactions with Udena? I know there's nothing wrong with it per se, but in the context of all that is going on, we'd like to place that on record too.
Yeah, he bought the shipping company in 2016. The good secretary mentioned that he bought Udena bought this company in 2016, but he was unaware that Udena will also buy the Chevron portion in 2019. So just I'm just relaying the chronology of events from the good secretary that the transaction happened in 2016.
For 3 billion pesos, if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry, Mr. President.
The Udena purchased his company Starlight when he was still in the private sector in 2016 for 3 billion pesos.
Part of my divestment when I was in the 2016, you were a secretary. I was bought it at 3 billion. No, I can't. Yeah. Mr. President, he sold it when he joined the government. As far as I understand it, he divested his shares or his
It's
holdings
required,
in that
yes,
company.
which is required if
Yes.
you're in the cabinet, yes.
And subsequently, Udena bought those shares. And the price of those shares cannot be disclosed for proprietary reasons. But definitely, the transaction happened between 2016 2017. And this is when the secretary was already in government and he divested his shareholdings in the said company.
And if I'm not mistaken, that is why his SAL-N jumped to about 1 billion. And I think that's on record because it's a public document. I want to go to another point. Is it also true? One more question, that the secretary of your or the board of directors of UC Malampaya is a Singaporean?
Yes, yes, Mr. President.
And another member of the board would be a Italian?
Meron ba? Yes, yes, Mr. President. Yes.
And
Yes.
then another member of the board is an Indian.
Indian ba?
Indian national. Rauf
Yes,
Kizir.
yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes, correct. Mr. President, that's correct.
So they're all foreigners, except maybe for Mr. Uy, no?
Yes, Mr. President, that's correct.
Yes, okay. We just wanted that on record. On another matter, this is regarding electric cooperatives. The electric cooperatives in Negros Occidental sought a dialogue with this representation a few weeks ago, expressing their concern in terms of the efforts of the DOE and the NEA to privatize electric cooperatives. According to these cooperatives, the downside of privatization may lead to such effects as loss of jobs upon privatization. There is no certainty that prices of electricity will be lowered by these privatized co-ops, and because they will be controlled by the private sector rather than the consumers who were elected by the cooperatives. We sent a letter to Secretary Cusi and the Administrator Juanesa, and we would like to know how does the NEA, for example, NEA, determine if an electric cooperative, quote unquote, is ailing and needs to be privatized?
But what's your policy? Mr. President, I had this conversation with Administrator Vanessa during the budget hearing of NEA, and there are a lot of good, well managed cooperatives. No? To name a few, Moresco, else, Pelco, yeah, Seneco, many, no? In fact, majority are well managed. However, there are a handful that are ailing, meaning they are receiving subsidies from government. And the reason for that is many reasons, no? Poor management, poor collection rate, poor infrastructure. And in a situation like that, where government subsidizes the operation of these ailing co-ops, I also suggested to the NEA to look at other options,
Yes.
including privatization of ailing co-ops.
Mhm.
The well-run co-ops, there's no reason to privatize, obviously. Even the being rehabilitated or on the way to rehabilitation co-ops, there's no reason to privatize that because as I've seen it through experience, co-ops help out each other, on the way to rehabilitation. But there are some perennial ailing co-ops. And we have to look at all options, including privatization, or else government will perennially or will always shell out the subsidies necessary to operate that. So that is the context of that discussion during the budget hearing. But as of this point, those ailing co-ops are not attractive to any private investor precisely because they're ailing. And seems to me that the only viable solution for them to survive is for government to shell out subsidies.
Yes. We'll go into that. That will be my next point. Just a step backwards. In the event, for example, of the option of privatization, is there a policy of the NEA as regards security of tenure or job support for jobs, so that it doesn't lead to the removal or the termination of these employees?
Even though the arrangement between the private operator and the co-op is between the two entities, NEA intervenes by way of recommending what are the things that they need to include in the contract to protect the co-op. One of the features that they always include is to protect the existing workforce.
Yes.
The case in point here will be Aleco in Albay and Zamzelco in Zamboanga, wherein a private operator came in. The board approved it. The member consumer owners ratified it. And part of the arrangement between the private operator is to protect the employees, the existing employees. So yes, there is a conscious effort to secure the security of tenure of the existing employees.
Yes, thank you. And going to the point of subsidy, is there an amount in the budget that is allotted to provide support or subsidies and benefits to ailing cooperatives?
Ngayon may binibigay tayo. Oh, yung loans. The loans. Yeah. But they don't pay the loans on time. Oh, yeah. Now we were discussing, we extend loans to ailing co-ops, but I was arguing with Yusek Vanessa that the loans are not paid on time. So in effect, it becomes a subsidy if you don't pay on time because government bears the financial cost or the cost to
cost of
finance
money.
it. Yeah,
Yes.
the cost of money. So to answer your question, Your Honor, yes, there is a loan that we give. We extend loan through NEA, but we also give subsidies for electrification and also for calamity rehabilitation.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes they do extend condonation of the loans, no? Because some of the co-ops, they couldn't pay, and the loans are just piling up. So they enter into a condonation procedure, Mr. President.
Just to clarify, going back to the policy of privatization is an option, but would you say that between privatization and strengthening the cooperatives, does the NAIA have a preference?
Well, based on my conversation with NEA through USEC, it's an option, but it will remain with the electric co-ops as to whether this will be beneficial to them or not. No, case in point there, I mentioned earlier will be Aleco, wherein Albay Electric Cooperative and San Miguel entered into an operating contract, and San Miguel shelled out all the capital expenditures needed to upgrade the lines. So it will be between the electric co-op and the private
Yes.
operator. But in the meantime, that the co-op is struggling or ailing, NEA will still step in, no, to support the electric co-op through loans or through other means.
Yes, I think the role precisely of NEA is to ensure, no, that as among cooperatives, for example, in the private sector, of course, there is a fear that big business, for example, will step in, and there's nothing wrong with that in per se, no. But we just want to make sure that the employees, of these the yung maliliit, no, na mga kooperatiba ay nabibigyan din ng suporta at proteksyon. That's why government steps in also.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. President, from my experience, no, the way I see it, if there are ailing co-ops or co-ops that are struggling, no, not ailing but struggling, the co-ops themselves help out each other. No,
Yes.
for example, in the case of the NECO in Davao, they formed a task force, and the task force is composed of different general managers, and they will go there and rehabilitate the management procedure. Normally, it's management procedures that they rehabilitate. The same in Kamsur in Casoreco 3. I have seen it with my own eyes that they formed a task force and they had rehabilitated, instituted reforms, instituted the stricter policies on collection, and they managed to rehabilitate it. So the first instinct of struggling co-ops is to seek help from their fellow co-ops by way of task force, creating a task force. And if those things don't work, they look at other options, no? Including privatization.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that clarification. And my last question would be on the matter of fuel subsidies. The Secretary of Agriculture, I understand, wrote a letter to the Secretary of Energy last October 2021, on the proposed petrol discount for farmers and fisherfolk. And yesterday in the DA hearing, the DA said that the Department of Energy, has yet to respond. May we know what is the response of the department, and what is the status of this request? Just to place on record that the cost of production for fisher folk, for example, 70% is spent on fuel. And because fuel prices have increased by as much as 20 pesos per liter since January, this is really hitting the fisher folk hard. Also, of course, the farmers, in terms of their machines, their tractors, and transport cost has affected also their own productivity, no, and their incomes.
I know that the good gentleman from Quezon City is a staunch advocate of agriculture, making sure that our farmers and fishermen are protected from the oil shocks. According to DOE, they've coordinated and liaised with the different oil companies in our country. And as we speak, they have been extending discounts ranging from 50 centavos to 4 pesos per liter for diesel and 1 peso to 5 pesos per liter for gasoline. So according to the DOE, this is being executed as we speak, targeting our farmers and our fisher folks.
We are looking at providing funding assistance for farmers and fisher folk. I think we've identified about 3 billion for fuel subsidies. Will the DOE be able to ensure that the coordination with the DA for this full implementation when it's approved will be undertaken? Para siyang I remember there was a Pantawid Pasada program where vouchers were released by the DOE. So this would be Pantawid Palaot. Palaot is the term for fisher folk who go out to sea. So Pantawid Palaot program for the fisher folk and Pantawid Pagsaka program for our farmers.
Well, Mr. President, unfortunately, from what I gathered from DOE, there is no such subsidy given to fishermen and farmers from our government. The discount that I mentioned earlier are from the good graces of the oil companies. Of course, this is at their own volition, but from a conscious effort from the government, none. No, in short, there is no subsidy given to our farmers and fishermen, and this is something that we should look at because in the Pantawid Pasada program, it's a huge relief for our drivers, but admittedly, the missing link there or the missing group will be our farmers and our fishermen who also consume refined products such as diesel and gasoline.
Yes, actually, just to clarify, distinguished sponsor, and this is my last point, the chairperson of the Committee on Finance actually adopted our proposal together with the proposal of several other senators to have a fuel discount budgeted for farmers and fisher folk. So 3 billion actually will be allotted for 2022. So we're the point we're raising is that if assuming this is approved, I think the vouchers will then be in coordination with the DA and the Department of Energy. Will then be the voucher system will then be implemented.
DA lang. From my experience, Your Honor, is normally the Pantawid program is executed by the agency who has supervision over that area, over that sector. For example, in the Pantawid Pasada program, it's the DOTR who distributes the relief cards or the subsidies. In this particular case, it might be the Department of Agriculture. But in terms of inputs, the Department of Energy will definitely share their inputs as to, let's say, the discounts and also some of the technical issues.
Okay. I understand. Thank you for that clarification, distinguished sponsor. And we have no other questions on on the DOE budget. We'd like to thank the distinguished sponsor for his patience in answering our questions. And thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I have no other questions. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Senator Kiko.
Thank you.
Pangilinan, Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And the last to interpolate the budget of the Department of Energy is our
Last but not
distinguished
least.
colleague, the President of the Pimentel Wing, Senator Coco Pimentel, our dear friend from Cagayan de Oro.
Yes, the distinguished gentleman from Cagayan de Oro, Senator Coco Pimentel is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. is our energetic chairman still
Still energetic.
energetic and willing to yield to hopefully few questions, but the number of questions will actually depend on the answers, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, willingly, more than willingly. I still have 2 bars out of my 4-bar battery, Mr. President.
So just tell us, Your Honor, if you like taking a break, we can always resume because we can always resume some other time because this department is very important because the future is energy, and energy is the future. And I remember watching a documentary which has the thesis that life is all about consumption of energy. So napakahalaga po ng department na ito. Mr. Chairman, may we get the total budget for this department for 2022? Wow.
Yeah. In total. In total, kasama yun. Yeah. Mr. President, it's 1.3 billion. That is included in the GAA, Mr. President.
Yes. So 1.3 billion. So kung ikumpara natin sa ibang departamento mukhang maliit pero meron kasi siya mga attached agencies po no na which help the department achieve its mandate, and they have their own budgets, or ang tawag mo ba doon is corporate operating budgets. Tama po ba 'yon?
Yes, Mr. President. It has other attached agencies to it. Such. Yes, Mr. President.
And yes, yun, and then one of these is the PNOC nga, di ba? And then although the PNOC COB is approved in our GAA, it is actually funded through internally generated funds or amounts. Tama po ba yun, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, tama ho yan, Mr. President. Although it comes here to get their approval, but the budget comes from their internally generated sources, Mr. President.
Pero pag hindi in-approve, they cannot actually use it. Ganun po ba yung pagkaintindi natin?
Yes, Mr. President, that's correct.
That's correct. So, okay. And then in addition to these attached agencies with their own budgets, the DOE also manages a special account in the general fund. Tama po ba 'yon?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'm just getting some validation. Yes, they have a special account, Mr. President.
Pero the amount in the special account is already included in the 1.3 mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman?
No,
Or
Mr.
separate?
President. It's separate, Mr. President.
Okay, nga. So,
And these are the proceeds from the service contracts, from oil and gas. These are all the proceeds from those, Mr. President.
kaya nga. So although on paper nakita mo na 1.3, it's they have access to a larger budget actually.
Yes, Mr. President.
A larger amount, yeah.
Yeah, it's the special accounts amount to 812 million pesos, Mr. President. So you're correct, Mr. President. So 1.3 plus 800, Mr. President.
So this yes, the 800 million plus special account is sourced from fees and revenues collected from the activities under the jurisdiction of the department.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. Does the department enjoy full discretion in the use of the special account in the general fund?
Okay, yung 800.
When I say full discretion, to the point that we can, in our minds, we can just add 800 million to 1.3 billion. So coming up with a figure of 2.1 billion, more or less, as the total amount that the DOE can use for its mandate.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, the process is Congress can reduce the special account, the automatic appropriation, Mr. President, but the items within the automatic appropriations, Congress cannot reappropriate it. So we can only lower down the amounts, in short.
But this is the special account is actual money, sir. Di ba? This is sourced from fees. So actual money, and if we reduce it to an amount lower than the actual collections, what will now happen to the excess?
Yes, Mr. President, it's actual amount. And the way I appreciate the process, Mr. President, over the past few years is we can lower that amount. For example, if Congress deems it, because they also submit the project to us, and if Congress deems it that the projects are not worth pursuing, Congress can lower the amount. But the projects within that special account, Congress cannot touch that. It's within the department where the appropriation comes from.
Yes, according to my notes, there are 7 projects to be funded under that special account. And one of these is the National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Program. Is this your law, Mr. Chairman? Fund this particular program?
Okay. Yes, Mr. President, I'm actually quite privy to this program because we passed this law, and the department is in the midst of fully implementing this law. One of the big expenditures will be the expansion of the department itself, or the bureau itself. No, they added more people to fully execute the law, Mr. President. So that is actually the biggest fund allocation, no? Which is the expansion of the bureau.
So tao, the amount will go to salary, sir.
Out of this 139, na po yung
Not to projects or activities.
In so far as the project is concerned, for example, they placed 15 million for information, education, and communication campaign through media placement. 20 million for conduct of studies on energy efficiency products, energy product labeling and testing. And those are some of the items within the 139 million, Mr. President.
Kasi maganda sir na program ito. And I'd like to congratulate our chairman for shepherding the passage of this law. Kasi ito po yung idea rito is ano, diba? This way conserve energy, so release some megawatts there for other uses, di ba? Parang gano'n. So in effect, you are in theory increasing supply without really increasing supply.
Correct.
Because you made the energy consumption more efficient.
Correct. In other jurisdictions, Mr. President, energy efficiency forms part of their energy supply, even though it's demand management, in a sense that a megawatt saved is a megawatt produced. So when you save electricity, it's in effect saving power for another use. No? So it's equivalent to building a new power plant. So that's the philosophy out of it, Mr. President.
Yes, sir, and I fully agree. Kaya nga, with the tripling of the budget, tignan na lang natin after year-end to 2022 kung anong na-achieve. And then,
Yeah.
kung maganda, then sa 2023 proposal, we can propose another tripling of the budget.
Well, Mr. President, I would like to commend the department headed by Director Patrick for the bureau headed by Director Patrick for making this law or operationalizing this law even during the time of pandemic. We've been liaising with them closely, getting updates on the implementation of this law because we believe that this law will strengthen our energy security position, Mr. President. And so far, they have already implemented 50% of the provisions of the law. We're pushing them to implement the full law. And we also empowered the DOE to make sure that industries, businesses also conserve energy. So this is a good law, Mr. President. And in fact, in other jurisdictions, like for example, Germany, energy efficiency is part of their strategy to improve their energy security position.
Ano pong isang aral dito? Ano isang tip or technique na lumalabas na one good way to conserve energy?
Well, Mr. President, part of the law is for the department to put energy efficiency labels in all consumer products. So we don't have that right now, but in the US, when you buy, let's say, a washing machine or television, there's a energy efficiency label. So in the future, we will see that. So before you buy consumer items, you will see how much energy it can save or how much energy it can consume. So we'll be conscious of the consumption of electricity of those consumer products.
Yes, but Mr. Chairman, we are already tripling the budget for this program. So hindi pa natin ma-achieve 'yan. Puro sweldo lang ba lahat talaga ito or puro media placements lang na we really with the tripling of the budget for this very good program in 2022 hindi pa rin natin makikita yung energy efficiency labels on electrical products.
Nga po ng mga energy efficiency.
Ano itong audit?
Dapat makita na siguro natin, Mr. Chairman, kasi na-triple na natin yung budget eh. Dapat meron na para tayong maramdaman na benepisyo from this very good program.
Hindi naman, may target lang kami.
Ito yung database.
Yung database naman po. Pasok.
Mr. President, a big chunk of the 139 million allocated is a 40 million for the conduct of energy audits under the Government Energy Management Program. So, in other words, the Bureau will now conduct energy audits in all government facilities, generating a baseline of energy consumption. And then from there, they will come up with their recommendation to government on how to reduce energy consumption. So this will cut across all government offices, including local government units, as prescribed in the law, Mr. President.
Well, what is important is may practical effect po after the amount is spent for the program, may practical effect, nakasave talaga tayo ng energy because of efficient usage.
Correct, Mr. President.
Yes, but if that will be achieved, I'm anticipating, I'm pledging my support to this program for the 2023. Taasan pa natin. Sino po Mr. Chairman, sino po ang naglatag nitong itong amounts dito sa special account in the general fund? Is it the secretary himself?
Sino ba?
Kasi
This
i-congratulate ko for tripling the amount of this National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Program. I fully agree that this program should be a flagship of the special account.
Well, Mr. President, the locally funded projects under the special account is a team effort of the department, and all of these amounts are geared towards implementing their programs, different programs, Mr. President.
Oh, kaya nga, very good very timely ito. And then pero may nakita ko sa number 8 itong pet bill naman ng ating majority leader, biofuels program is 7.8 million na lang ang budget pala na binigay rito. So anyway, another locally funded project under that special account, Mr. Chairman, is the total electrification project. Project naman po ito, 500 million pesos. Ano naman po ang detalye nito? Pero yung name kasi niya, total electrification. What is this? By end 2022, ano na ang makikita natin sa Pilipinas? We will achieve total electrification already?
Well, definitely not, Mr. President. No? In my estimate, we will need approximately 25 to 30 billion pesos to reach total electrification, Mr. President. And that assumes that we will put the traditional grid extension or line extension to all of those unelectrified houses, Mr. President. This is only a small portion to reach total electrification, Mr. President. Just a brief backgrounder, the department has a total electrification program. This is 500 million every year. And
Every
this
year.
program is normally downloaded to the NEA and NPC for implementation.
So how many years na po ito being funded in our budget?
It started 2019 na ba? Ang tagal na yan. Yeah. But it's the same banana. Diba? Same total electrification ang objective. Yeah, it started 2019, Mr. President, but I was talking to Director Mario that this is a reincarnation of various total electrification programs. For example, the different acronyms. There are a lot of acronyms, but basically, this has been the total electrification has been the objective of the department for a long time, but they consolidated it in 2019 and reincarnated it to the name of Total Electrification Program, Mr. President.
Oo nga. So, kaya nga, the objective is total electrification using different project names. Pero kung isusuma total natin, Mr. Chairman, if you can ask somebody who has institutional memory in the department, estimate lang, kung isusuma total lahat ng projects towards the goal of or the objective of total electrification, magkano na po ang naibuhos natin dito sa project na ito?
I think from 2019 meron. But the other ones...
Tapos yung past pa po, yung ibang pangalan, kasi ikukumpara ko sa estimate nyo, sir. Mr. Chairman, ikukumpara ko sa estimate mo kanina, sabi mo, mga 30 billion is needed.
Yeah, correct. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, from 2019 to 2021, the total allotment is about 1.2 billion pesos, Mr. President. But prior to 2019, we're still getting the... Yeah. Yeah, but on the average, how much? More or less, yun. 500. Okay, yeah. So prior to the TEP, Mr. President, meaning 2018 uh, and 2018 and prior years, the average is about 150 million, Mr. President. Although it's named after the branding of the program has different names, but on the average, they allocated about 150 million, Mr. President.
Kaya sir, okay lang if no one can give a rough estimate, but over the years, if kung isuma total na nga natin towards this total electrification objective, magkano na kaya na naibuhos po natin sa objective na ito? Appearing under different project names.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, I don't have the records prior to 2017, but just as an example, in 2017, 1.2 billion was allocated. And then for 2018, it's about a billion, Mr. President. So it ranges between a billion to 500 million.
Okay,
So
thank you,
in
sir.
short, about 3.5 billion since 2017, Mr. President. Prior to that,
sir.
I might need some time to get the information, Mr. President.
So and then the success of this project is measured by the number of sitios or barangays which are now ano ba? I don't know the term, electrified. Is that the term?
Yes, Mr. President, that's a term we use here in the committee. Yes, it's measured by the number of household electrified.
Oo nga. So kaya when this program is audited, or if you want to assess the success of the program, that information is available, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. President, it's through the electric cooperatives, Mr. President. So what happens here is the funds come from the DOE. It's downloaded to NEA, and then NEA gives it to the electric cooperative. So there's validation and confirmation that the electrification transpired at the household level.
But my staff gives me gave me the information that the utilization rate of this amount is less than 1%. Tama po ba yun? Obligation rate is 40%, but utilization rate is 1%. Ano pong ibig sabihin ng utilization rate? So kung 500 yan, 5 million pesos lang po ang nagasta?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'm looking at the figures now, and it has really had problems in obligating and disbursing the funds, Mr. President. And you're right, no, in 2021, the obligation rate is only 52%, 0.52%, Mr. President. In
52 na,
2020, it's 0.61%. No, so yes, there's seems to be an issue on utilizing these funds, Mr. President.
Ito po ba ang meaning nito when utilization is 1%? So 1% of 500 million is 5 million. So ibig sabihin nun 495 million pesos lie idle with the DOE.
Yes, Mr. President. That's correct, Mr. President.
Was that the case for kasi the year 2021 hindi pa tapos eh. Was that the case for 2020? Malaki pong amount lying idle?
Yes, Mr. President. I got confirmation from Director Mario.
How much po for 2020?
Based on our data right now, the obligation rate is only 0.61%. So the unobligated amount is about 224 million, Mr. President. 2020. So
Hindi,
it's
hindi,
really
hindi,
a
61%, sir, not 0.61. Kasi 0.61 is less than 1%. Eh.
yes, 0.61.
Ilan, sir? Ilan?
Yeah, point.
0.61, Mr. President, less than 1%. This is on my
Less than 1%. Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So less than 1% of the funds have been obligated, Mr. President.
Okay, but yun na lang isipin siguro natin, Mr. Chairman, yung lifetime ng funds. 2 years ba yan? And then they return to the treasury or they remain with the fund because it is a special, it's part of the special account. What are the mechanics, Mr. Chairman, para maintindihan natin?
Bumabalik to, di ba?
Yes, pinabalik po lahat.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's being returned, Mr. President, to
Okay.
the Treasury. And I say unfortunate because this is supposed to be spent for electrification, and one of our
Okay.
advocacies is total electrification, as in total, no, 100% electrification. But 2020, admittedly, it's a time of COVID, and everyone was grappling on what to do. But 2021. There's no excuse, no, because we know what to do already, no. But seems to me that the obligation rate is still not above par, not acceptable, Mr. President, or above par.
I will follow your lead here, Mr. Chairman. Kung if you believe na sayang if we let the amount, malaking amount din po yun, 500 million,
Malaki.
just lie idle in the under a special account because there seems to be problem
Yes.
there seems to be problem in the implementation ba nito. So but
Correct.
are you telling us, Mr. Chairman, that for 2022 ma-overcome na nila yung problema or hindi pa rin ganun kaklaro?
Yes.
Pero anyway, Mr. Chairman, sige, you're consulting.
Yeah, Mr. President, I was consulting Director Mario, and there seems to be a issue with COA, wherein the downloading of funds were prohibited because of lack of documents or lack of clarity, Mr. President. So, in effect, no, in short, the funds can only be executed if you download it to NEA and to NPC. But since COA barred it from being transferred, in effect, DOE cannot do anything. No? So, as a remedy, they came out with two policy guidelines. No? And these policy guidelines is meant to address the concerns of the COA. No? So they're very confident that in 2022 the department will be able to use the funds, and they will be compliant with the COA requirements.
Does the chairman share the confidence? The same confidence? Kasi baka sayang po yung 500, sir. Baka pwede natin mailipat o ano.
Well, Mr. President, I was also scrutinizing this. Thank you for that question, Mr. President. That's a good question because I was personally scrutinizing this fund, and the 500 million is aimed to electrify certain locations. But unfortunately, the department has not submitted to us those exact locations. So I am not I'm not confident to approve such an amount without any specific location, Mr. President. So we've been requesting from the department to submit to us those exact locations so that it will form part of the records. If not, no, Mr. President, it's a lump sum amount. And
Kaya,
we
Mr.
all
Chairman,
yes, and we all know
we are
that
we are approaching deadline deadline time na, lampas na nga alas 12 ngayon eh. So tanungin na lang natin ng DOE, meron bang listahan ito ng areas which will benefit from the 500 million total electrification budget o wala? And if merong listahan together with the timetable siguro, we should ask the DOE to submit to the plenary through the committee chair that list or that plan. Kung wala, sabihin na lang po kasi at least alam natin kasi ano na tayo we are approaching the finish line for the DOE budget already, Mr. Chairman.
Di pa nasasabit. Requested. If you don't submit it, di wala nga nung hawak namin, mahuhula kami. Sorry, Mr. President. Sorry for that, Mr. President. But they have not submitted. They said they have the document, but they haven't submitted. So obviously, we're holding nothing, no, Mr. President. So
Can I request for it, Mr. Chairman? So can I make a formal request? But si Senator Ontiveros made a formal request for 4 service contracts. Ako siguro, this is my formal request lang for a list of the areas which will benefit from this 500 million peso year in year out budget for the total electrification project. So
yes,
can I?
thank you for that formal request, Mr. President, and that will bolster our formal request from them. No, because we've been requesting that list from them because my intention is to make it part of the records. No, and I'm very I'm very concerned and also I'm not very comfortable in approving a lump sum amount, Mr. President, because we all know we discourage lump sum amounts.
So the chairman is telling the plenary that you have made this request earlier, and
Yes, Mr. President.
DOE has not complied with your request. So tanong na lang natin, sir, para hindi na tayo kung meron o wala. Pag wala, we accept the answer na wala.
Meron. Can you
Meron ba o wala?
Yes, Mr. President, I got confirmation from Director Mario that they have the list and they
Okay.
have committed to submit it to us before lunch, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you very much. Kailangan lang palang
Or before lunch
kailangan
today,
pala
Mr.
mag-tandem
President.
tayo, Mr. Chairman.
Correct.
Is it true that because my staff informed me that is it true that the e-trikes topic still finds its way into the COA report for DOE?
The program was concluded in 2019, and all of observations findings have been closed out as of the latest.
So na-distribute na lahat? How many na-distribute?
3,000.
Right, Mr. President, I was advised by Director Patrick that 3,000 e-trikes were already distributed all over the nation. I can see in the list that Valenzuela is a beneficiary, and I can attest it. We're actually a beneficiary. We use it to shuttle our constituents in different tourist. We used it as a tourist vehicle. So they've distributed it, Mr. President, all 3,000 of it.
And at what cost, Mr. Chairman? What cost for the total project? And then did we need to borrow for the project?
How much?
Total cost. Okay.
Mr. President, this is a loan from ADB, and the total amount of the loan is about 500 million pesos, Mr. President.
500 million
Pesos,
Are
Mr.
you sure?
President.
A scale down.
Are you sure about the currency, sir? Pesos?
Pesos. Pesos.
Pesos po yun. we will confirm, we'll get you the, sorry, 500 lang alam ko, 500.
500 what?
Half a billion. And the original kasi,
Hindi naman pwede
sorry,
dollars
wait,
to, that's
wait.
25 billion pesos.
The original,
This is 500 million pesos, Mr. President. I think dollars is too much.
Okay, 500 million pesos. So, magkano po yung for 3,000 e-trikes, magkano po per e-trike yun?
around 450,000 pesos.
166,000 pesos per e-trike? Ganun po ba yun? Tama po ba yung aking calculator
About
na
four-
inantok na rin?
About 450,000 per trike, Mr. President.
Oh,
Per
mas mahal
e-trike.
pa. Naging 450,000 pesos per e-trike.
More or less, Mr. President. I was advised that this is the amount.
Ano ba itsura ng e-trike, sir? Para bang tricycle din, except that
No, Mr. President, it looks like a capsule, Mr. President. Parang siyang
okay.
capsule. Doesn't look like the traditional tricycle, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, siguro kailangan na lang
Sorry, Mr.
siguro.
President. They requested to clarify their numbers. It's
1.35 billion.
1.35 billion is the total amount.
Oo nga 1.35 billion.
Sorry about that, Mr. President.
Oo, sige. Kasi nga my notes tell me that we entered into 2 loan agreements.
Correct, Mr. President.
$300 million and another $100 million. So $400 million. May counterpart tayo na $99 million. So, and then may $5 million pa na grant. So the total cost is $504 million for 3,000 e-trikes. So,
Scale down.
kaninong idea ba to? Hindi ba to masyadong overpriced, Mr. Chairman?
Ano po? Yun po. Tama po si Secretary. The original was that, that's design. Pero pagpasok po nila, scale down po. Kaya ito nila po yung ginagawa.
But Mr. President, in fairness to the good secretary, this project was an inherited project, and I remember asking this when I assumed chairman of the Energy Committee, and right after we inquired about this project, I remember that the department started to download the tricycles to the LGUs, and I can attest to that downloading because Valenzuela City is a beneficiary of that downloading of e-trikes among many of the LGUs. So it's a inherited project, and they just made do with the existing tricycles. As to the cost of the tricycles, I'm not very. Yeah, Director Patrick is saying that this is on the high side of the pricing, Mr. President.
Oo nga sir, 450, I made some calculations here. Tama, 450,000 pesos per e-trike. I mean,
Yeah.
hindi ka ba mapapakamot sa ulo niyan na medyo bakit tayo nakaisip ng project na ganyan? So, anong year po to nag-start? Sinong secretary nun? I'm sure hindi naman si Secretary Cusi noong time na yun.
Year was this started? Bago pa ito kay Secretary?
Before the Secretary,
What year?
2013.
2013 pa yata to eh.
Yes, 2013.
Yeah, 2013, Mr. President. That was
Sige.
entered into.
Secretary.
The loan was entered into on 2013, Mr. President.
So, for example, for the COA report covering the DOE for the year 2021, kunyari after year end na, the matter of the e-trikes will no longer find its way into the COA report for DOE. Settled matter na po ito?
Yes po.
Yes, Mr. President.
Walang
Yes, Mr.
kinasuhan
President.
dito? Walang kinasuhan dito, Mr. Chairman?
wala.
Yeah, Mr. President, none, Mr. President. Because,
Okay.
in
So
fairness
siguro,
to the good secretary, he stopped the project when he assumed because he discovered that the e-trikes were priced on the high side. And in fairness, also, I was also there when he instructed the department to immediately distribute the e-trikes so that the e-trikes will not rot and and be unusable in the warehouses. So it was distributed in various LGUs, Mr. President.
sige, siguro. But ito, I guess that we have been, the full amount of the loan has been extended to us. So that means we are siguro paying some penalty or paying interest on the full amount. I do not know now the unused amount. What happened to the unused amount? Are we able to use it for other programs and projects, etc.? So anyway, baka siguro if should this deserve a specific Senate resolution siguro, Mr. Chairman, doon na natin mapapag-usapan to if we want to investigate this.
Kaya na pumayag sila ng scale down.
Yeah, Mr. President, I know for a fact that we're still paying for this loan, and it's not in the budget of DOE, so I suspect that it's in the budget of the Department of Finance. So I'll get more information about this. I saw this in 2016 when we were scrutinizing the budget of the Department of Energy. And as to the subsequent events, I have to get myself updated regarding the payment of the loan and the loan itself.
Kasi $500 million times 50, 25 billion pesos. The Secretary Cusi stopped it at 1.35 billion pesos, believing that the project has some defects and questionable features. So, ganun. So, di ba? So, 20 plus billion pesos po yun kung na-release na sa atin. Saan pumunta yung pera na yun? Okay, so anyway, Mr. Chairman, thank you for also sharing my interest in the e-trikes. No? Now, let's go to Malampaya if you still have energy, sir. But if you feel
Yes, Mr. President, I still have energy to discuss these very important matters, Mr. President.
But before we go to Malampaya, sir, because I stated earlier that the future is energy and energy is the future. There is also this budget for nuclear energy program implementing organization at 25 million pesos. And what is this all about, sir? Are we seriously studying nuclear power?
Yes, continuously studying.
Yeah.
Actually, it's lowered na.
Yeah.
Reduced na.
Yeah.
So, capacity.
Yeah. Yun sinabi mo sa akin. No? Yeah.
Opo.
Yeah, I actually asked ASEC JRP about this, no. And for the last 4 years, we've been funding a nuclear research program, and now the total amount of the funding is approximately 266 million pesos, Mr. President. And my personal take on this, Mr. President, I know that nuclear is quite a controversial fuel source. However, with the advent and the discussions on climate change, energy security, it's worth looking into the science of nuclear. And in fact, I went with His Honor to look at a cousin of this Bataan nuclear power plant in Slovenia. That was a eye opener for me, and something that the knowledge I gained there is something that I use in the discussion of nuclear here in our country. But having said that, yes, we funded an ongoing research for nuclear with the hope of the president will give his imprimatur, no, in jump-starting our nuclear program.
Mr. Chairman, where is that found, yung 266 million budget for this nuclear research?
Mr. President, it's since 2018 we've been funding that.
Okay.
In,
Cumulative.
yeah,
Cumulative na yan.
Yeah, cumulative na siya. This is
Yung approved sa budget, ito yung allocated, ito lang nagastos.
yeah.
Okay.
Baba na ng gastos.
Baba.
Well, well, I must, Mr. President, I was quite surprised that we allocated so far from 2018 to 2021 cumulatively 241 million. But
241.
apparently only 46 million was obligated throughout the year. So an obligation rate of 27%. So quite astonishingly low in terms of obligation. And well, thank you for raising this, because maybe it's time to also look at the allocations to this nuclear program, because same principle, if we don't use it, then why are we allocating some amounts? But just to put it on record that the amounts requested by the department insofar as the nuclear research is concerned has been endorsed by the Senate, precisely because in the talk of nuclear, we need science and we need research.
Kaya nga, the amount that we have endorsed is this 25 million. Ito po ba?
Yan, opo.
For
Yes,
2022?
for next year, Mr. President.
And we are actually decreasing the 20 from the 2021 by almost half.
Yes, Mr. President, because that's the request of the department, Mr. President.
Yes.
But
Okay. Sige po, sana yung research, yung product ng research, kahit hindi pa final, pero let us say substantive na, they also inform our committee and as well as the legislators kung kumusta na po.
yes, Mr. President, that's exactly what I mentioned during the budget hearing. In fact, I also received a commitment from ASEC Artisa that there will be another hearing on their output. Again, no, we have funded 266 million for the research, or sorry, 241 million for the research. However, it was not spent to its maximum. Nevertheless, since this research has been funded over the past 5 years, we requested to be briefed on the output by way of a hearing, so that we will put this on record. What are their findings? What are the laws? If you remember, Mr. President, when we went to Austria, IAEA briefed us on the laws, the conventions, the structure for a nascent nuclear power industry. And they gave us actually a guidebook on how to jumpstart our own nuclear power industry. And those things should be discussed openly through a hearing. And the DOE has committed to us that they will brief us on their findings.
Good, Mr. Chairman. I will join you in the
Yes.
said hearing. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I think the IAEA told us that they are not endorsing the adoption of nuclear power, di ba? They are not endorsing, they are not discouraging, they take a neutral position. Yan po ang pagkasabi nila.
Correct, Mr. President. It really depends on the country whether they will adopt a nuclear. They will adopt nuclear as part of their energy mix, and but it's not as simple as just adopting. No? We need to make sure that we have the proper laws, the regulations, even the convention. I remember we had to sign 4 or 5 international convention ranging from waste disposal to waste transport to many international treaties and conventions that we need to sign. So it's not as simple as the other sources of energy. Nevertheless, it's worth looking into because nuclear is carbon emissions free. and it's stable in terms of base load output. So it's worth looking, but we need to make sure that we apply science in the discussion of nuclear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. So I hope na NEPIO will be ready with all of this, even the legal framework siguro kasi malaki-laking funding na po 'yan, Mr. Chairman. After
Yes,
all these
malaki
years,
yan.
dapat pati po 'yun, alam na po nila 'yun. So,
Correct, Mr. President. It's not a small
yes,
amount.
yes, let's now proceed to the Malampaya issue. But before that, Mr. President, can I ask for a real 1-minute break to address the liquidity issue, Mr. Chairman?
Same here, Mr. President.
Yes. Just 1 minute.
Yes,
minute
session
suspension.
suspended for a minute.
So,
We recognize Senator Coco Pimentel and the sponsor of the budget of the Department
Ng
of
water.
Energy, Senator Win
Bigyan mo ako
Gatchalian.
water. Bottled water.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, this will be the last topic of my interpellation, Malampaya, the matter of Malampaya, because I think we have a legal issue here, and I've noticed the change in the position of the DOE, because I have a timeline of DOE's statements or positions here, and on November 10, 2020, I think responsible officials in the DOE have publicly stated that the change in the ownership of Chevron Malampaya LLC, when all the shares were bought, di ba tama po yun, all the shares were bought by UC Malampaya, required the approval of the Department of Energy because of existing law. Ngayon, and then when I was researching on this issue, they say the secretary yata, or maybe his media bureau, issued some press releases that this is ano yun, yung ano ba, square peg in a circle, parang ganon, and that those insisting that the DOE's approval is needed are confused about the issue, including our hardworking chairman who was labeled as confused on the issue. So may we know the final ano nga, what is the final position of the DOE? Did this transaction, dun muna tayo sa, wag muna yung Shell, the 45% of Chevron, did that require DOE's approval under a certain PD for it to be effective? What's the final answer? Kasi we're approaching now the deadline for the approval of the budget. We need the final answer.
Premise.
Di ba magsasalita?
Premise. There's no law or any regulation requiring approval. But because of our not to put energy security at least as a policy, we reviewed it using a benchmark that is akin to sale of shares, which is transfer of price obligation, the DC 00704003.
Ano ulit?
Ito po.
I beg the indulgence of the good gentleman from Cagayan de Oro for a few minutes. No?
Okay, yes sir. Yes sir.
Yeah.
So, there's no law ruling on the review purposes of national interest policy. DOE deemed it matter of due diligence to review transaction to ensure that the country's energy is not put at risk. It's DOE used as a benchmark, DOEDC, to review the transaction, but it does not squarely apply. Evaluation criteria applies to a buying company. No,
What
there
is
is
your...
no need to review.
Okay.
There's no law or rule or regulation.
Okay. Take the president. There's no need for us to take stance and
Applied a benchmark and applied it. Which when we applied, you did not apply it quickly. Kasi you cannot apply pala. Okay, ano yan?
Well, Mr. President, the official answer of the Secretary and ASEC Arquisa is there is no need for the review. There's no need, and because there's no law. And
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
which is entirely contrary to the submissions to this committee, well, not this
Right.
committee, but the Committee on Energy,
Right.
and the statements and disclosure of DOE officials during the first, second hearing related to the Malampaya transaction. But just to put it on record tonight, that the position of the DOE that there is no need for the review.
But we reviewed.
Okay, so
But we reviewed.
no need. So they're changing they're changing their August 5, 2020 letter from Undersecretary Marcos to Shell Philippines Exploration BV, na ganun yung tenor yata, that it needs to be reviewed, and then the November 10, 2020 testimony before the Energy Committee by Assistant Secretary Pulido. So in effect, they are changing their position. Okay, so
And if there's no, but we reviewed.
Well, Asik Arquisa is here saying that their position is there is no law, but they still reviewed the transaction, which is again
And applied DC
and
07, 007.
yeah, and applied the DC 2007 as benchmark. No, that is their official position.
kaya nga.
Which is again contrary to all the documents submitted to the Energy Committee,
Right.
pursuant to the resolution that was filed by yours truly, Senator Soto and Senator Lacson, to look into the transaction surrounding SC38.
Actually, there is a law. So, ito nga, PD 87, sections 11 and 48, and then Service Contract 38, the terms of the service contract, section 16.4. So, these are the rules or the laws involved, and the new position of the DOE is that not applicable to the transaction. And yet the DOE conducted an optional, ganun po ba lumalabas? It's an optional review of the transaction. Pero napansin lang po namin, kaming mga hindi naman expert dito sa matter na ito, na nag-review lang, nag-aral lang, although it was an optional review, and then using the DC, di ko kasi memorize,
2007.
the DC 2007-04-0003 as the standard, di ba? But they played around with the standard, Mr. Chairman, because the competencies or the capabilities of the contractor, which must be examined or tested, must be legal, technical, and financial. So tatlo. And then when we look at the facts, one entity was examined on 2 of the 3 competencies, and another entity, they use another entity for the 3rd competency. So, akala ko gagamitin yung DC 2007 as the standard, and yet you did not even properly apply DC 2007 in your optional review. So that is the question. And then ang question ko pala, Mr. Chairman, when that so-called optional review was being conducted, was it already optional in their mind? Kasi they had an earlier stand na expressed by in your hearing by Assistant Secretary Pulido, that our legal services held that it falls squarely within the department circular, and it should require an evaluation of the technical, legal, and financial capacity of the transferee so that the DOE may approve such transfer. So yun. So, when they conducted the review, which they now call as optional, was that their frame of mind when they were doing the review? Or
Well,
they were doing this, when they were reviewing, they were seriously applying the law, and yet nag-mix and match pa po sila. This company deserves 2, tests for two competencies. The other company will be tested for the third competency. Bakit ganon? Ano nangyari doon?
That's precisely, Mr. President, my observation based on the documents and the evidence submitted to the Committee on Energy. And during the hearing, I told them that all the documents were submitted to us, and we just made sense painstakingly analyzing those documents. And the same conclusion came out from our analysis that the corporations were cherry-picked to cherry-picked to yield approval at the end of the process, Mr. President. So your observation is precisely this representation's observation. And um, I also did not get this clarification even in the beginning of the submission of documents that a certain benchmark or optional evaluation will be conducted. We were made to understand that DC 2007 and PD 87 were the law and the circular that will be used to evaluate this transaction. And it's very clear in DC 2007 that only one entity will be evaluated. And so your observation is exactly the same as my observation, Mr. President.
That's why it's very unfortunate, Mr. Chairman, when I read nga the news reports concerning Malampaya when DOE changed their position. They labeled our hardworking chairman as confused. Siya na nga, I give credit to our chairman for bringing this issue out, explaining it simply to us so that we can understand. So I do not think I am confused because I looked at the facts. So who really is confused here, Mr. Chairman, or who is confusing the issue? Kasi ito sa notes ko, sa notes din ng staff ko, hindi nila tinignan si UC Malampaya, yung bumibili for its financial capability. Ang ginawa nila, they looked at UC38 LLC, yung new name na yan nung binili, Chevron Malampaya LLC. Tama po ba yung Mr. Chairman? Yun ang tinignan nila for the financial capability. So si UC Malampaya, yung bumili ng shares ay tinest lang nila sa legal and technical, not sa financial. So imagine mo yun, kahit na binasa mo yung law, 3 competencies yun eh. I-apply mo sa same entity yun. The entity which is changing the character of one of the parties involved in the service contract. Yun po yun eh. Even if you say na it is not squarely applicable, but you will apply optionally or voluntarily the tests. You mishandled it. You misapplied even the tests of the DC 2007. Can we get an explanation po, Mr. Chairman? Why did this happen? I mean, bakit ganon? Ano lang, explanation lang po for the record kasi papunta na po tayo sa finish line sa budget ng DOE. We just need this clarified so that siguro we will not be confused. Sige, I admit ko na confused ako ngayon. So kailangan siguro paliwanagan ako para hindi na ako confused.
In concept, that's the DC. But when you apply it already, it's not the same as it is theoretically made. Because when you apply it, DC applies to 2 entities. You have a buying corporation. And,
Yes, I know that.
yes, and you have a resulting different corporation. And that
Yes, I know
resulting
that.
different corporation is very important. You have to evaluate it. But that's not the case. You have a buying corporation, both the shares.
I know that.
You have a selling corporation, and the entity is the same. That's why it is not the same entity that you will
Hindi, bakit
evaluate.
nga ang tanong niya? Bakit ngayon nga in-apply?
Entity in the
Yeah,
it us.
in the work,
Because they're the one that going to fund
the work
the
program.
work program.
The question
Not
there is
not the company outside. It is UC
We applied it. Yeah, we applied it, but it does not really apply.
The financial of UC 38.
you applied it but not really applied.
No, it does not
How
apply.
do I-
It's not. It's a square peg in a round hole, because that DC is applicable when there is a resulting corporation. But here you have the same corporation. There's no resulting corporation, so you cannot really apply it, because in a resulting corporation, you evaluate the financial capability. Eh wala naman yun. You just have the same corporation that is operating and that will implement the work program. So it's different. It does not apply.
It's
Because
UC 38 is the one
it's
that we're running.
Sorry, Mr. President, I'm trying to make sense of the information, no? But not in my good conscience I can take the position of the department, because um, that's not what the evidence are saying, Mr. President. Um, it's very clear to me that they took a position of applying DC 2007 in this transaction, but your observation is the same as my observation. Different entities were evaluated using DC 2007, Mr. President. So I was accused of being confused, but in my review of the evidence, it's crystal clear that DC 2007 was violated in order to move forward with this approval, Mr. President. And I cannot, in my good conscience, take the position of the DOE, because that's not what the evidence is telling us, Mr. President.
Kasi ganito sir sa notes ko, in April 2021, DOE approved the Odena Chevron deal. Tama po ba yun? April 2021? So up in yung date of approval. So therefore the review must have been before that date in April. So first quarter of 2021. Tapos ang expressed position nila doon sa hearing po ng Energy Committee natin November 10, 2020, ang expressed position ng DOE is that the evaluation, the approval is necessary. Therefore the 3 tests are necessary. Tapos pagdating na lang dun sa so itong optional, I'm sure was already expressed after April 2021. So ibig sabihin nun, ang feeling ko, ang point of view of the entire department when it was being reviewed and when the approval was granted in April 2021 is that it is an honest to goodness review because the requirement squarely falls upon the transaction. So yun po yung aking pakiramdam sa time flow sa nangyaring facts, Mr. Chairman. When did the DOE start changing its tune? Kung malagay ba natin yung month and year, Mr. Chairman? Bigla na lang square peg in a round hole press release nila. When was this done?
don't see any conflict. When we applied the DC, we don't see any conflict. We applied it, but when you apply it, makikita mo corporation 1, corporation 2.
I know that.
Pero ito pala, sale of shares lang, hindi nagpalit ng corporation. So how do you apply it? So now, hindi talaga mag-apply. That's why yung financial obligation, nung tinignan niya, in-evaluate niya yung implementing corporation, yung UC38, kasi that's the one that is implementing the work program. So that's where the problem came out now, happened, because
So when was that?
when it applied to the financial capacity evaluation, dito pala i-apply. Hindi pala mag-apply square.
So when yung tanong nga, when
That's what came out in the evaluation, the recommendation of the finance. That's ang lumabas nun, UC 38.
when was that?
Nandun sa report po.
Ano nga?
Nandun sa report nila. Yung nasa report nila, UC 38.
What month was that?
Yung random nila, di ba? Yun yung nakalagay. UC 38.
What anong month yun?
Hindi din mo random. UC 38, ang lampas.
That is 5.
Oo.
So when did you change your tanong niya? When
Hindi,
did
hindi.
you change?
Hindi ko nag-change. We just said na kaya yung UC 38 ang lumabas doon kasi hindi talaga nag-apply yung TC.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, I sorry for the delay. I truly apologize for the long conversation with Asik Arquisa, but again, I'm trying to make sense of the events, but I couldn't absorb it. But from my notes, that they issued a press release on that square peg on a round hole, plus confused si Senator Gatchalian. That was October 26, 2021. No? So I take it personally that that was the change of tone
Oh.
of the department.
October na po yun. October 2021. Approval, April 2021. Opinions, November 2020. At ito pa pala sa notes ko, meron pa palang March 15, 2021, memorandum to the Secretary from the DOE Legal Services. The same must be approved by the DOE before it becomes binding and effective. So, kung makikita po natin na in all likelihood, when the review was being done, prior to the official approval by the DOE of the transaction, they were of the thinking that they were doing a serious review under DC 2007 and under the laws PD 87, where there should have been 3 tests for three competencies or 3 capabilities. So, ang simple sana dun, Mr. Chairman, 1 company, 3 tests. Technical, legal, financial capability. Or, in case of doubt, the 2 companies, tagti 3 tests, a total of 6 tests. Ganon sana ang good faith application nun. Hindi ang ginawa 1 company, 2 tests, and then the other company, 1 test. So, ibig sabihin nun, ang suspecha natin, if that first company had been tested on the financial, the 3rd test, it would have failed. Yan po yung suspecha po natin na lumalabas kasi nag-mix and match po sila eh. So, 'di ba? I mean logical 'yun eh. One company sana, all the 3 tests to be applied to that 1 company. Or to be sure, there are 2 companies, apply the 3 tests for the 2 companies. O di para makita natin. So, the problem now, Mr. Chairman, with our proceedings is that you have not been telling us the response that they've been giving you. So hindi po nare-record ko rin sagot nila sa tanong natin. So how do we proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Well, Mr. President, they gave me some papers here, and I am trying to again make sense of their answers, especially on applying, or I think what they said is applying but cannot be applied. So I am trying to be honest about it. It's I'm trying to make some coherence on the answers, no, Mr. President. But I think we conducted 3 hearings on this, Mr. President, and I'm sure that you have looked at the transcript of those hearings based on your questions, and I think those are the basically the hearings will bear out all the submissions and all the statements of the department. No? So we can come up my conclusion based on those submissions is exactly what your conclusions are. No, that the application of the DC 2007 is not was not fairly applied to a single entity, albeit applied to two different entities. No, but the DC 2007 is very clear that you will only apply it to one entity, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to the same entity. And sabi ko nga kanina, in case of doubt, you apply the three tests to both entities. Di ba? Ganun, hindi yung mag-mix and match po tayo. Ang masakit pa pala dito, sabi ng notes ko rito, and actually I was present there, no? I think it was Senator Bina who pointed it out, na
Correct.
yung pumasa sa financial capability test, UC38 LLC, ang ginamit ay unsigned and unaudited financial statements. Is that a fact, Mr. Chairman?
Based on the submissions that they gave us, yes, Mr. President.
Yun na nga. So, unsigned and audited, pumasa yung TENES na corporation. So we really have a problem here. At saka, okay, siguro background question. Ito pong UC38, tama, no? Hindi UC38, SC, Service Contract 38. Because kanina, si Senator Ontiveros asked for 4 service contracts. So, and then I heard that these were publicly bidded out. Ito bang SC38, subject of the Malampaya, was this from initially also publicly bidded out, Mr. Chairman?
Tagal na yun.
Yes, matagal na to. 2002 pa yata to. Was this, meron siguro may institutional memory dyan sa DOE.
Is it bidded?
1990, during the time of President.
But was that bidded out?
I don't
Yeah. Well, as far as the recollection of the gentleman from the DOE, it was not bidded out. During those times,
not.
it
Okay.
was nominated. No, I think that's the right terminology, Mr. President.
And then did I hear it correctly that the 4 service contracts brought up by Senator Ontiveros earlier, these were bidded out?
Tama. Part of the
Tama.
contract.
So we are observing a new rule, a new process. Tama po ba 'yon?
Yes, Mr. President. Yeah, it's a contracting round, Mr. President, and I recall that even during the last administration, the previous administration, they conducted contracting rounds to interested parties who want to participate in the oil and gas industry, Mr. President.
Yes, oo. And then how about the extension of SC38? Who makes the decision? Is this dependent on the sole discretion of is it the President of the Philippines or the Secretary of the Department?
Parties may mutually agree.
From my Asik Arquisa mentioned that it's only a mutual agreement between two parties, Mr. President.
Okay, on the part of government po, sino po ang who will give the ang tawag ko doon, the decision that it is extended?
The President, yan.
It's the DOE that is,
Secretary?
They won't go up to the President.
but for purposes of prudence, sir, we
Yeah, it's only the department, Mr. President, who will decide
Correct.
on the Department of Energy, who will decide on the extension of this contract, Mr. President, of the service contract.
Correct. That's represented by the Secretary of of Energy. And
Yes.
an extent in SC38, if we talk about extension, is there a maximum number of years for the extension?
An additional 15 years.
Additional
15 years, Mr. President.
Maximum na 'yon, ano?
Yes.
That's the longest period of extension that the Secretary can grant. Tama po ba yan? Is that a correct statement, Mr. Chairman?
Tama, no? Yes, Mr. President. That's the correct statement, Mr. President.
Well, okay, balik na lang po ako dun sa naging, alam mo Mr. Chairman, naging legal issue kasi when the DOE changed its stand na hindi applicable. Although, as I understand this, the holder of Service Contract 38 is an unincorporated joint venture. Yun yung pagkaintindi ko. So tatlong entities po yata ito sila eh. So para silang partnership eh.
Correct, Mr. President. It's
Oo,
governed
tatlo.
by what they call a joint operating agreement, Mr. President.
Right,
That's
tatlong
the contract that
entities.
binds them together.
Right, and then since binili ng UC Malampaya ang all the shares, yan, unless I'm mistaken, dapat all the shares binili of Chevron Malampaya LLC. So in effect, in my opinion, the personality of that party in the partnership changed. Kasi all its shares kinuha nga nung UC Malampaya. So yung party, yung partner representing the government, the PNOC EC, owner of 10%, could have demanded also actually the examination of this new entity owning or bringing the name of the old partner. Pero it becomes a new person kasi all the shares binili. So it actually changes the partnership. Actually, it becomes a new partnership na dapat tinest po sila in accordance with law. So that is my position, Mr. Chairman. I don't think at this point in time I will be able to get the DOE to agree because they have already changed their tune. So it is very unfortunate. And then there is another transaction I think which will follow. 'Di ba? Hindi pa yata approve yung hindi pa yata approve yung acquisition of another Odena company of the Shell 45% Shell Philippine Exploration interest. So what is now the position, Mr. Chairman? I think we can still get the position of the DOE now. They can make their position official. Doon sa next transaction on the other 45% of Shell. Ano naman ang position ngayon ng DOE? Does it need DOE approval or not?
Under the contract, yes.
But based on the disclosure of ASEC Arquisa under the contract,
It has to be approved.
the contract between Shell and
And the Odena.
Odena, yes, it needs the approval of the DOE.
Is DOE telling us that the terms of the contract are different? May difference din sa first sa Chevron and then dito sa Shell, merong different wording, ganun po ba?
Yes,
It's the conditions.
yeah, it's different, and apparently it's one of the conditions of the agreement between Shell and Odena that they seek first government approval prior to the consummation of the transaction, Mr. President.
What is the company naman, sir? I don't think it's the same company, no? It's not UC
No, it's
Malampaya. Now, what is the name of the company now acquiring the 45% share of Shell PH Exploration?
It's called Malampaya Energy, Mr. President. But if you look at the structure, it's also part of the Odena Group, Mr. President.
Yes, I know. Malampaya Energy naman this
Yes,
time. So it's also buying all the shares. Buying all the shares in Shell PH Exploration BV. Ganun po ba 'yon?
Yes, Mr. President. They're buying all the shares.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so now that it is in the terms of the contract, what will DOE do? Who will they subject to the three tests? Sino? Is it now Shell PH Exploration BV as bought, or ano una chairman? Ano yung name ulit ng company? Malampaya Energy?
Malampaya Energy, Mr.
The purchaser of all the shares. O sino pong itetest natin dito sa 3 competencies?
The basic is the one that will be involved in the consortium. So that is still specs.
So specs will be
Specs, still specs, yes.
specs, which is the operating.
Operative, yes.
From
Yeah,
my information from ASEC Arquisa, it will be specs who will be subjected to the three-way evaluation, Mr. President. Specs is currently the entity part of the joint operating agreement, which is the consortium, Mr. President.
Specs is the name of the, let us say, the second player, the second partner in the three partnership.
No, specs po is Shell Philippines Exploration.
Yes.
Still in the consortium.
Yeah, which is a member of the consortium.
Yes,
Mr.
yes, it's
President.
one of the 3. Okay.
Correct.
So siya, okay. So in spite of the fact that Malampaya Energy is buying all the shares of that company, in effect changing the character of that company. So DOE will still test the old company which was bought, not the new one buying into the company. Ganun po ba yung interpretation nila?
The company did not change.
Yeah, I know. Pero
Yeah.
precisely. But all the shares were bought. So in effect, ang gusto ko sabihin, I think it's time to pierce the veil of corporate identity. Because in a purchase agreement like this, where company X buys all the shares of company Y, although on paper it is still company Y, in reality it's company X already. Kasi if you examine company Y and use the papers that you have examined before, anong magbabago? Walang magbabago. Kasi sabi mo, it's the same company. Therefore, wala talagang magbabago sa technical competence, legal competence, financial competence. Walang magbabago. But actually, behind the old corporate name is a new person or juridical personality. Anong malay mo? Anong malay natin ngayon sa legal capability noon, sa technical capability noon, o sa financial capability noon?
Naintindihan ko. Yeah, well,
Example, Shell Philippines, Occidental Philippines, 50%, 50%. This was bought by the Royal Dutch Shell Group of Companies. So
hirap explain yun.
So naging 50% na ito, naging Shell. So
Yeah, well,
in the first companies that happened, naging 100% Shell and Shell.
yeah, they're trying to illustrate to me what happened in the past, but it's very difficult to narrate that, Mr. President, because it's all.
We'll submit
Yeah.
a position.
Yeah, well, they will submit the position paper on the Shell transaction.
About the question. Answer the question.
About the questions that were being asked, Mr. President. But in essence, yes, Mr. President, you're correct that nothing will actually change because they are evaluating the operating company, Mr. President. You're correct.
Oo nga, so ganun na nga. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, it is a fact na hindi pa po approve yun, di ba? Yung Shell Philippines, yung specs and Malampaya Energy deal hindi pa approved. So
Yes.
we will continue to monitor the action of the DOE on this transaction.
Correct,
Kasi
Mr. President. And
this time, This time, by the terms of the contract, required na nila mandatory review na to eh. Mandatory review because approval is necessary by the terms of the contract.
Correct, Mr. President. And as Carquisa mentioned to me that they will be sending a position paper on the discussions tonight, related to the discussions tonight.
Sige. I will no longer discuss yung ano yung the non-exercise of the right of first refusal of PNOCEC, no? Kasi sila yata, Mr. Chairman, yung may right of first refusal being the one of the three partners, no? Yung po ba yun?
Correct, Mr. President.
It's PNOCEC, not PNOC.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. Okay.
It was
So,
actually discussed earlier by, I think, Senator Hontiveros, Mr. President.
yes. Hindi ko na lang hindi na natin i-question 'yon. Ang sabi naman nila, they discussed it sa board meeting nila, so we just get the minutes na lang to show ano yung positions nila, ano yung ideas na lumabas doon. And then siguro since because of the change in the position of the DOE, this has become a legal issue. If I can also request for the following materials and documents, Mr. Chairman, so that we can go back to past practices or history. If possible, Mr. Chairman, all documents related to the specs ODENA transaction pending before the DOE. Can that be requested? Number one muna, Chairman. Can we get the response kung papayag ang DOE? That's not confidential, and sir, di ba? Kasi those should be public records.
Okay.
Okay yun, sir?
Pertinent document.
Yes, which you will use in your review para maka-review din kami.
Wala pa yan. Nasa PNOCEC pa yan.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, is it granted or not?
Yeah. They said all pertinent documents, but you can
Sige.
elaborate those documents so that they will be guided accordingly, Mr. President.
I think the parties submit documents for review because the DC
Yes,
the DC I think enumerates the required documents. So the
Correct.
documents na lang po submitted for the review so that tayo rin we can also make our own review. Tignan natin kung magtugma tayo sa conclusion natin with the DOE.
Yeah, the
And then-
Secretary agreed to the submission. Yeah.
Majority
And all
leader
the
last three
documents.
three sentences.
Yeah.
Ready na si majority leader to suspend. So, can I request for all documents related to the approval of the specs and PNOCEC transaction in 1999? So we can compare with the past standards, Mr. President.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. President, I heard a resounding okay.
So all documents related to the approval of the specs, Shell Philippines LLC and Texaco Philippines transaction in 1999. Same purpose din po yun. We will look at how the standards were implemented in the past. And then last, all documents related to the approval of the Occidental International Exploration and Production Company and Pecten Yemen Masila transaction in 1998. Is that possible, Mr. Chairman?
Can you repeat that again, Mr. Chair?
The OPSI.
Occidental.
All documents related to the approval of the Occidental International Exploration and
Yes,
Production Company
Yes.
and Pecten Yemen Masila transaction
yes.
in 1998.
Yes.
Royal Dutch Company, Shell. Also.
Yes, they will provide the subcommittee, Mr. Chair.
Yun lang po yung purpose natin. If we look at the past transactions, the standards applied therein. So baka meron po tayong makitang whether or we will call for consistency in the application of standards. So siguro, Mr. Chairman, at least narinig nila yung points natin. Although hindi ko narinig yung sagot nila, the chairman refused to repeat their response siguro, but I think they gave in writing, di ba, Mr. Chairman? So daanan na lang po natin yung mga written submissions po ng Department of Energy. So I think, Mr. Chairman, I will no longer need to ask my other detailed questions on the Malampaya. At least the general points nakita na po natin, and I have also I have also a feeling of the general position of the DOE. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time that you gave me, and thank you to the DOE also for their patience. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President, and my
Thank you,
colleagues
thank
who are
you.
still in the session hall.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to my dear brother and colleague from Cagayan de Oro, Senator Coco Pimentel. We appreciate and
Thank you.
we appreciate and of course take note of all your questions to the DOE. With that, Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpret the department. And just for a time check, it is
123.
1:23 in the morning. Aside from Senator Coco's online, it's only Senator Joel Villanueva, the presiding officer, and the chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Angara, and the secretariat is here.
Staff.
Our secretary, Senate secretary, is still fresh looking. Although when she goes home, she'll play the piano, Mr. President. To reminisce tonight. Mr. President, I move that the budget of the Department of Energy, Office of the Secretary, National Electrification Administration, National Power Corporation, National Electrification, what? And budgets of the DOE attached corporations be deemed approved and submitted, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? The chair
Mr.
hears
Chairman.
none. The
Mr. Chairman, Mr.
Yes,
President, Mr. President,
Senator Pimentel, you're recognized.
isn't that subject to
Yes,
this
it is
revision
subject
and,
to
review
The submission of all the
Of all the
pertinent
documents,
documents asked for by our distinguished colleagues, Your
Yes.
Honor, Senator Pimentel.
So we approve deemed submitted, but of course, if they do not submit the documents, we can recall them back, Mr. Chairman.
And
Mr.
with
President.
with the understanding that should we have questions arising from the documents, they will be available to respond.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you. May I ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, we, just to repeat the motion, we move that the budgets that I aforementioned earlier be deemed submitted, subject, of course, to the submission of all the documents that will be given tomorrow morning, Mr. President, without prejudice for our colleagues to ask questions when they get the documents. So move.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion of the majority leader is hereby approved.
Yes, before I suspend, we also would like to approve the budget. There's no member wishes to ask questions on the budget of the Optical Media Board, OMB. So I move that the budget be deemed submitted, Mr.
Is
President.
there any objection? The chair hears none. The budget of the Optical Media Board is hereby deemed submitted.
And just for the record, we're left with the DOH. It will be transferred to tomorrow's schedule. And I believe it will be after.
Not tomorrow, it's later, Your Honor.
Yes, it will be later. That's
Yeah.
great.
Or,
Okay.
so the schedule tomorrow will be the Department of
DOJ? No, DOJ muna po.
DOJ first.
DOJ, and then DICT, and then DOH.
DOJ, DICT, DOH.
Sisingin po natin yung DOH.
Okay. And then the regular schedule.
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. President, I move that my apologies to everybody for the latest of the hour. We also had a delegation today, so we had to pause for about 3 hours, which maybe ate into our night tonight. But Mr. President, with that, I move to suspend session until 11 o'clock in the morning, Wednesday, that is later,
Later.
November 17, 2021. Maraming salamat po sa staff and secretariat. Thank you
to
for
the
your
staff,
patience,
to the
guys.
staff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the session is hereby suspended until 11 o'clock in the morning, November 17, 2021. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sen Coco, thank you.